today, as a Pan-Africanist leader, you know that this is the path that we are treading on. You need a tight security. This is why I am happy to always see him being surrounded by his fellow soldiers who are well armed.
But why do you need a tight security? Why?
Why? Because we are seen as a threat. That's the reality. We have to understand that
a threat to your own people or to the West?
A threat to the Western powers and a threat to some of your people who have some hidden agendas. Not every one of us who is black is automatically a Pan-Africanist. No, some don't even believe in that.
Okay.
They don't even think that we can move forward. Some have some personal interests, and they don't care about the well-being of their people. They care about their own personal interests above the well-being of their people. Not every one of us is genuine. That's the reality. So some of your people who may be used against you, I think even Malcolm X put it better. He said they will pay one of us to kill one of us just to say it was one of us. So if they come directly at you, people will say that, okay, everybody will know. But if they use one of your people to kill you, then they can say, look at them. They even kill their own good leaders. So the blame game comes back to us again. And this is why I think that every Pan-Africanist leader need a very tight security, because we have learned what happened to people like Patrice Emery Lumumba. We have learned from what happened to people like Thomas Sankara. We have also learned what happened to people like America Cabral. We have learned a lot from those incidents, and we don't want it to repeat. We want our good leaders to remain in power until they are done with their mission. But for the meantime, whilst they are in power, they need a very tight security, and they should not be naive about it. And the other point will be, in as much as you do good as a leader, you serve the interests of your people, don't overstay in power. It is said that when a bird stands on a tree for too long, it attracts stones. And I think at some point, when people even need you most, that's the time that you should resign.
So today I have two gentlemen. So before we start the topic proper, I will allow them to introduce themselves. So first I'll start with you, Dennis.
Yeah. Good afternoon, wonderful viewers, and to the Historic TV, we are happy to be here. I am here on behalf of a movement called Nurturing Patriotic Citizens. I am their IPRO, and just to say a little bit about myself, I am a teacher by profession, and I teach history, government, and civic education that will be in St. Augustine's. But I'm also a staunch Pan-Africanist ideology, somebody who is Pan-Africanist minded, or I'm a Pan-Africanist in such. I get acquainted with the ideology since my upper basic school. Then I start reading more about it, and I get more interested in the ideology. So without saying much, I will allow my colleague to also introduce himself, then we can begin to talk about the ideology in proper.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis, for giving me the floor to also introduce myself. Thank you, Ali, for inviting us, for being our host. Of course, I am Mustafa Escham. I am here representing the chairman of the movement called Nurturing Patriotic Citizens. And I am the deputy chairman of the movement. I am also a teacher by profession. Currently, I am pursuing my bachelor's degree, of course, and then we are keen followers of Pan-Africanism, and then we believe as the show unfolds, we will talk more about it by the grace of God. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for honoring our invitations. They are from the movement called Nurturing Patriotic Citizens, of course, which each and every Gambian or African should join, because we believe this movement are those that will, teach African people about Pan-Africanism, nationalism, and of course for them to become conscious. I will start with you, Dennis. Pan-Africanism. Tell the audience in more detail what is Pan-Africanism and where does it originate from?
All right, Mr. Traor'e, thank you a lot for that wonderful question. Now, when we talk about Pan-Africanism, we cannot talk about it without touching the foundation which is history. Now, Pan-Africanism as a concept started in the mid-19th century, and it is a call for all black people to be united, form a single race and a culture that will be recognized and respected by the white race. Now, if you know history a little bit, you realize that it's a time in which Africans were discriminated And then this movement showed that, okay, if we come together and stand, perhaps we'll get recognized, we'll be respected, and we'll be treated with dignity. So the activists, now when we talk about activists in this concept or in this context, we are looking at those who are campaigning for the political change. And the pioneers of the Pan-Africanist concept were people like Henry Sylvester Williams from Trinidad, you have Edward Blyden, you have Marcus Garvey, and you have W.E.B. Du Bois. These were the activists of the Pan-Africanist concept. Now, as a concept, they decided that, especially Henry Sylvester, he saw that, okay, Africans were discriminated, or black people were discriminated, especially in America at that time. He said, let me call a conference. So he called the first Pan-Africanist conference, which was held in 1900. And there he discussed the issue of discrimination. It was in that conference that the term Pan-Africanism was first introduced by Henry Sylvester. And then it is in the same conference that, conference that you have W.E.B. Du Bois, who said that he made a prophecy, which happens to be true. He said the problem of the 20th century is the problem of color line. Then later in 1919, they called another conference. This time around, it was W.E.B. Du Bois in collaboration with Blaise Diagne of Senegal. And they said that in that conference that Africans, the native Africans, deserve or have the right, or must have the right, to participate in their government. Now, in this government, it means the colonial government. Then later, they call another conference again. That was in 1921. And in that conference, they discussed that, okay, why not Africans start to eventually participate in their own government? It was a gradual movement. They did not ask for self-independence at that time. No, they were just saying that self-determination may not be timely at that time, but at least they should participate in the affairs of their country. So they called another one before the end of the Second World War. And in that conference, W.E.B. Du Bois even said that we are not yet ready for self-determination, because he was looking at Africa in the context of the European lenses. But the most famous one will be the fifth conference that was held in 1945, called the 1945 Manchester Conference. In that conference, they decided that we need immediate independence. And they said that, okay, that colonial boundaries that were set up or created by the colonialists was a deliberate attempt to stop Africans from political unification, which happens to be true, and I agree with them. Because if you look at all the problems we have today in terms of border irredentism, in terms of jingoistic nationalism, all started from there. So I will stop here for now, because there's a lot to say. If not,
thank you so very much. Now to Mr. Chairman. I believe Pan-Africanism came into being as a result of colonialism, when the European powers sat down in Berlin 1884-1885 and divided Africa into 54 odd nations, and Africa had never been the same again. Most of those African head of state who were advocating for Pan-Africanism, nationalisms, they were humiliated. Some were killed, some were ousted from power. And right now we are seeing young African advocating for Pan-Africanism. What is the future for those people?
Thank you, Ali, for the question. I want to thank my colleague Dennis for also hitting the history, the way it started. If you look at the future of Pan-Africanism, there are hopes that things will change. Looking at the way in which things are unfolding at the moment, let's refer back to Burkina Faso, present. Burkina Faso, they had a leader. That leader who never did anything to uplift their country out of poverty. Now we've seen a young soldier, Ibrahim Traor'e, who has emerged. And all because he wants Burkina Faso to live a decent life. That is why this soldier, Ibrahim Traor'e, came and then made an overthrow and then sat as a president. And right now we are seeing lots of developments happen. If you look at Burkina Faso right now, you see Ibrahim Traor'e and the team, the first tomato plant, which is expected to export tons and tons of tomatoes all over Africa and beyond. This is the spirit. You are there as a leader because this was fought a long time ago. If we talk about Kwame Nkrumah, he talked about unifying African leaders so that they pull in the same direction. This is what he saw, that African leaders, if we are not together, we will never be able to achieve what we want to achieve as Africans, and that is development in a nation.
Yeah, very profound, so profound. Now to you, Dennis, again. Most of the African leaders at the time who were advocating for Pan-Africanism, as I asked Mr. Cham, I will of course ask you the same questions. Most of them were humiliated. We have seen Kwame Nkrumah in 1996, he was ousted from power. We have seen Thomas Sankara, he was killed in Burkina Faso. We have seen many African people who were advocating for Pan-Africanism. Of course, they end up, some they were sent to exile, some were executed.
Yeah, I think.
What is the spirit of Pan-Africanism in our these generations? What is the spirit of Pan-Africanism in our these generations?
Anyways, I think the problem of them having to be humiliated is not something new, because even within the Pan-Africanist movement, they have a division. When we were asking for independence around 1960, it's normally called the Year of Africa, because that's the time that most African nations were pushing for self-independence or complete independence. So we have a group called the Monrovia Group, and we have a group called the Casablanca Group. That is before they formed the Organization of African Unity. So the Casablanca Group is called Casablanca Group because the first meeting that they held was in Morocco, Casablanca in Morocco. So there you have our 7 independent African nations at the time who were radicals, who were calling for immediate unification of all the independent African states to fight against colonialism and to be totally independent. In that way, after, they can perhaps form what we call the United States of Africa. That was the dream. It comprised of Ghana, you have Guinea, you have Mali, you have Morocco, you have Algeria, Libya. These were the Casablanca group. Then you have the other one, Brazzaville and Monrovia. They decided that, okay, if we should have that now, it may jeopardize, sovereignty. So they want to maintain the colonial boundaries, and in the same way, they also want to have collaboration or economic ties with the former colonizers. So they were much a flexible wing. The others see them as lackeys of imperialism. So Haile Selassie said, okay, instead of having this division which will hinder our development, why not we have a meeting where all of us can sit together and discuss this in detail. So when they met in Addis Ababa, that was in May 1963, they decided to have a dialogue about it. And what Kwame Nkrumah said, if they have adhered to that, I think Africa right now will have been a different story. What we are talking about this guy in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traor'e, what he is advocating for is not new. Recently I saw a petition, people are signing a petition that he should be the president of the United States of Africa, which I agree with. But this is not anything new. This started since the time of Kwame Nkrumah. Then he said that let's form one currency, one army, and get united. In that way we can tackle the colonial masters, because they will be coming in other forms of colonialism. But people at that time, each one of them wanted to maintain his seat as president. And they eventually, all of them became, or most of them became victims. It's either you dance to the colonial tune, or you get couped, or in most cases you get assassinated if you are not very lucky. That is what happened to people like Amilcar Cabral. That's what happened to Thomas Sankara. That's what happened to Patrice Emery Lumumba. That is what happened to a lot of, most of them. Yeah, most of them.
Pan-Africanism,
not an exception, he was also couped.
Pan-Africanism advocates for united Africa.
Yeah.
That Africa should be united, whereby they will have one government, they will use one currency. But looking at the political fracas right now in Africa, we have in 55 old nations. So right now we are advocating for a united Africa.
Yes.
Now the European came and introduced their system of administration, some indirect rule assimilations.
Yeah.
We have seen. Right now we are speaking different languages as our official language.
Yeah.
What is your take on these questions? Can Africa be a united Africa?
It can be. But I must also be realistic that it will be very, very, very difficult. Because looking at the time that the likes of Kwame Nkrumah were advocating for this, At that time, we have less independent African nations. I think only 33 of them attended what we call the OAU at that time. But before that, I want to bring your attention to the 1945 Manchester Conference. What was said there? They said that that artificial boundaries and territorial boundaries that are drawn by the colonial master was a deliberate attempt to stop the eventual unification of African states, which Kwame Nkrumah at that time understood. He knew that if we don't form it now, it will be very difficult, because by that time we are just talking about 27 independent African nations by the time that they held their meeting in Casablanca. Now imagine if it was difficult around that time, what will happen now that we are 50-something? So this is what the problem was. People at that time could not see what Kwame Nkrumah was seeing. He has the foresight of a giraffe, whilst they have the foresight of a chicken. What he is saying is today going to be very difficult for us. But whether it can be, I cannot say it cannot be. But I know that it's going to be very, very difficult for us to attain that United States of Africa at this stage. Kwame Nkrumah tried it, they did not listen to him. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi tried it, it did not work. Now with Ibrahim Traor'e, I hope that Africans will be sober this time around to do the right thing.
Now, Mr. Chama, it was Marcus Garvey who said, "No any other salvation for the Negro but through a free and independent Africa." That was Marcus Garvey. He struggled for the independence of the black people. And at the latter part, I believe he was in prison and then he died struggling for the independence of the black people, for the African people. Now that we are seeing young African leaders are emerging, speaking in a more eloquent manner that African people should be united all under one umbrella. Recently, I have seen a petition whereby they said Africa should have only one currency, that is Afro currency. In the spirit of Pan-Africanism, what are some of the ways that Africans should put into their minds that without Pan-Africanism, Africa will not work or Africa will not be united? What are some of the things that Africans should put into the back of their mind? That it is, we have to unite or we perish.
Yeah. Thank you. You know, unity is something that is very important. If we look at the confusion all over the world now, let me refer you back to what Pierre Lumumba said. In a competition of, you know, in a business competition, it's a cutthroat competition. And if you are not united as one people, you will not be able to move an agenda. And that is why Africa has to unite as one people to be able to move an agenda. And the agenda will come in the later future if we are united. Now, looking at the West, the white people, we have been dominated, we've been colonized, and still we cannot say colonialism has gone completely. It has come in another phase. And that phase is what we have to understand as Africans and unite to be able to tackle that against the West or the white people. Because if you look at them, all they are fighting for is for their own good. Why not we as Africans do the same, unite as one Africa to be able to do the same thing? He talked about Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah did a lot when it comes to talking about Africans uniting as one people. Marcus Garvey, the same thing. And it reminds me of Bob Marley. Like Patrice Lumumba has said it, that Bob Marley, when it came to, or when it comes to Pan-Africanism, he did a lot. And he was even described as a buffalo soldier
in the heart of America.
Yeah. So that is the spirit that we should develop as young Africans, so that this Africa that we live in will move to another level. Right now, if you come to my country, the Gambia, you know, looking at the way things are unfolding, if we are not united as Gambian and as Africans, we will lose the Gambia. And in fact, it has started. A host of important places that we can use to tap our resources. to be able to uplift our country, to elevate our country, to alleviate the poverty. A host of all those places are now being leased. Some are being given to foreign investors. Where are we as a country if we're talking about Pan-Africanism? We should refer ourselves back to those forefathers who fought for Pan-Africanism, so that we will be able to learn something about it and be able to do something for our country.
So profound, we either survive or we perish. Of course, in 1963, when 32 heads of sovereign independent African states converged in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, in order to form an institution or an organization where African people could discuss and solve their problem, which was called the Organization of African Unity, and of course in 2002 it was changed to African Union to better capture the organization or the image of the organization. We have seen in that gathering, then we had Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Emperor Haile Selassie, Modibo Keita, Sekou Touré, most of the African nationalists. But in that gathering, they were unable to agree. In fact, as Lumumba will put it, it was a toothless bulldog. So now that we are advocating for a united Africa, when our forefathers were there in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, they were unable to agree. So now, will it be possible for the current African head of state right now that we are having to organize a conference or to go and converge again in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to agree on the formations of African unity? Will it be possible?
I think in as much as, thank you for that wonderful question anyway. I think in as much as they have the interest of their people in heart, any African leader who has the interest of his people in heart should be able to confide to a meeting if called, a meeting that has to do with the United States of Africa. I don't think that you should abstain yourself from it. Because we said, okay, by that time when Kwame Nkrumah said that, let's get rid of these artificial borders. One thing we have to keep in mind, these borders, we are not the ones who even demarcate them. That's the saddest thing. This was demarcated in the Berlin conference, where no African leader was invited. It was Europeans that sat together in the Berlin conference of 1884 and decided this is how we are going to, divide Africa like a piece of cake. No African was invited to set light on the geopolitical problems it's going to cause us in the near future. Nobody was there. So I think we having to keep the same colonial borders as if this is something that has been divinely designed makes no sense. It's artificial. We can go back to the drawing board. When Kwame Nkrumah said this, a lot of leaders say that, okay, it was premature for them to do that. But after that, look at what happened. People like Julius Nyerere of Tanzania later wrote a letter apologizing that they were wrong and Kwame Nkrumah was right, because look at the eventual problems that it causes when they fail to unite at that stage. And it will make it more difficult now for us. What will happen if we continue to insist that we cannot unite, we go on our separate ways? They will come back again and still colonize us. This time it's not going to be that original colonialism that we know, but it's going to be in the form of a neo-colonial movement, and it's going to be in economic aspects. And that's exactly what is happening right now. So I think it's time that African leaders sit together and think again. We have made a mistake and we learn from that. We know that this is not the way forward. Right now I don't think that there should be any reason why we should stop. And thank God a lot of Pan-Africanists are coming to power. I think it's in fact high time that Pan-Africanist-oriented individuals stop just having the dialogue, but also engage in politics. At the end of the day, when they lead their context, they can come back and make that particular decision for the United States of Africa in the near future. Because I don't see how Africans are going to develop, how Africans are going to be free from colonial domination, that is neo-colonial domination, if they are not united. I don't see any way about it. There is no way out as far as Africans are not united. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, we either learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. And I think we have so far suffered from that. It's high time that we wise up and then meet and make the final decision for the eventual unification of the entire African continent. That's the only way out for me.
So profound. Mr. Cham, united we stand, divided we fall. In 2011, the world or the African head of state stand aside and watch Gaddafi being executed in cold blood. and now that we are advocating for United Africa. And in fact, those days, even in 2011 or prior to 2011, Africans were advocating for United Africa. But looking at Gaddafi, what he brought in Libya, I don't think there's an African leader right now who can, try to bring those development. But the African leaders stand aside and watch Gaddafi being liquidated. And now that we are saying Pan-Africanism, we are saying nationalism, we are saying United States of Africa, what is going to be your take? If an African leader or a Pan-African is being seen to be humiliated, is being seen to be boycotted from his people, what is going to be your take?
Anyway, thank you. You know, Africa, we must learn to know our history. And if we appreciate the way history unfolds, we will be able to defend our brothers and sisters who talk about the unification of Africa. People like Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi is a man whom I admire. Gaddafi stood the same way Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, and you name them, the same way they stood and talked about the unification of Africa. That is the same way he stood and talked about it. And what happened to those people is the same thing that happened to him. His people were screwed to gang against him. And then that was what led to his disappearance from the face of this earth. The same way it will happen and happen again if we are not united as one Africa. Africa is a continent which is blessed in so many resources. And this is why Africa will never be left free by those neo-colonialists. We will never be left free because of what they are seeing in Africa. Africa is a continent that is rich in resources, minerals. These are the minerals that our leaders are supposed to use to build Africa. And that is why the neo-colonialists will never leave Africa to be free, because they are also interested in these resources. And it is high time we realize that these are the resources that can take us out of poverty. These are the resources, when utilized in the proper way, can take us out of poverty. Africa, our leaders that were here before, they saw one united Africa. You talked about Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Jomo Kenyatta. You talk about our neighboring country, Senegal, Leopold Sedar Senghor. They all talked about Africa, the unity in Africa, African unity. So why not our current leaders do the same, follow the same trend? Because if we are not united as one Africa, we will always be in trouble. And that is why there is need for unity in Africa.
So profound. Thank you. Nurturing patriotic citizens. I believe your mindset is based on Pan-Africanism. What can you people do to inculcate the spirit of Pan-Africanism in the young Gambians that are coming up, our future leaders? What can you people do?
That's very good. That's a very good question. Anyways, we already started, and we held series of activities. I think we went to schools, tried to sensitize the students on on nurturing sovereign citizens, what it is all about, how to be patriotic as a citizen, and just sit there and do nothing and complain about how the country is moving, but your own individual contribution towards the well-being of the state. So we have been doing that. We have been to a lot of schools for now. And also we went to Carton. We went for a community outreach. In that way, we asked people, engage them. And to our surprise, a lot don't want to participate in politics. That's what we call political apathy. But then we asked them, if you don't want to participate in politics, and you are complaining that the country is not moving in the right direction, then you are part of the problem. Because if all of us sit down and fold our arms, then how will things change? Nothing will change. And the other funny thing that I observe within this short span of our community outreach and going to schools is that Gambians actually, we know the problem. But our attitude towards the problem, that's the problem to me. How do we vote? How do we decide who to vote for? Gambians vote based on sentiments. And when I go to schools, I always use one Greek logic there. The Greeks were very wise people. Right now, if you ask somebody who is a citizen, they will just say a legal member of a state. But the Greeks had something different in mind. And I always use that example, that in this society, we always have three categories of people. You have the idiots. These are people who are totally negligent. They don't care. They litter everywhere and just don't mind. Then you have the tribesmen. These are people who will never vote for you because they don't share the same tribe with you or they don't share the same region with you. And I always say it, even if you vote for somebody that you share the same region with, that person is not there to take you to heaven. So you voting for somebody based on religious affiliation does not help. Look at the content of the character of the person and vote for the person based on that. But to say that things like sentiments like religion and tribal issues, that's the reason why you are voting for somebody, will not move. And then you have the third category of people. They are the citizens. These are a category of people that don't care about your tribe or religion. They vote for you because you have the idea and because you have the content of character to lead. Those are the true citizens according to this Greek classification. And I agree with them. To be politically correct, we just say that as far as you are 18 years, you have the voter's card, you vote. But let's look at it. In a democratic system, all of us vote. The vote of one wise person is the same as the vote of one foolish man. One vote. At the end of the day, this is why democracy is backfiring. Because you should educate the citizens first. They should be aware first before you bring democracy. But if the citizens are not aware and you bring democracy, at the end of the day, democracy is about numbers. Whoever has the highest lead. So people will be making decisions based on numbers instead of knowledge. And for you to have a good leadership, the decision has to be based on knowledge instead of numbers. So this is why civic education, things like this, going out to sensitize people is the key foundation. Without that, your democracy is going to backfire. It's not going to serve you well. And that's exactly what is happening in the Gambia and in a lot of African nations. Yeah.
Mr. Chama, looking at Africa at large, some of our African hero states, they succumb to European ideology. In fact, as it stands right now, some of the Africans, they don't buy this African idea of Pan-Africanism. They deal more with the European or with the Westerns than the African themselves. Can Pan-Africanism survive in Africa as it stands? Can it survive?
A good question. Pan-Africanism, like I always believe, it can survive, but it will be hard to survive. Because if you look at the way things are moving, a lot of people are talking about Pan-Africanism. And that is why I am optimistic that it can survive. The only thing that we need to do as young Africans is to enlighten our fellow brothers and sisters, like what we are doing, nurturing sovereign citizens, or nurturing patriotic citizens. Our movement is engaged in sensitizing the public on how to love your country and take that necessary stand that you should take as a citizen to move your country to a better level. Dennis has talked about it. We are engaged in activities that we think will be able to enlighten our people to come up with the most meaningful change. Because if we do not do so, what happened yesterday will repeat today. What happened yesterday was people who began talking about Pan-Africanism, their people were used against them. And then most of them were being massacred, were being, you saw coup d'etats happening, A lot of things happened in the past. And if you are not careful, the way things are unfolding, the same trend will continue. And that is why it is important for us as young Gambians and young Africans to engage in citizenship sensitization. That is why our movement has taken it upon ourselves to go out, sensitize communities, sensitize students, and sensitize everybody, because the people are the ones who make government. And if they are not sensitized, the wrong choice will be made. And if the wrong choice is made, we are doomed.
We are doomed. Any African leader who stand to fight for his people, to fight for the African people, who always advocate for a united Africa, is wiped out. Now that we have seen currently in Guinea-Bissau, in Guinea-Conakry rather, coup d'etat emerged not long ago, but the leaders perhaps is bringing development. We have seen in Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traor'e, of course, I believe he's a replica of Thomas Sankara. Now the world is watching at him, all eyes on him. What is your advice to these African leaders who just emerge, who are advocating for Pan-Africanism, who are advocating for United States of Africa? What's your advice to those people?
I think the moment you advocate for Pan-Africanism, you're always seen as a threat. And it's not different from now, back then to now, it's not different. And I think one thing they need to learn from their predecessors, let's say, is not to be naive. Because if you look at the likes of Thomas Sankara, he was a very humble guy, may not go with a lot of security guards. He didn't go alone to exercise and do all those things. Today, as a Pan-Africanist leader, you know that this is the path that you are treading on. You need a tight security. So this is why I am happy to always see him being surrounded by his fellow soldiers who are well armed.
But why do you need a tight security? Why?
Why? Because we are seen as a threat. That's the reality. We have to understand that
a threat to your own people, or to the West?
A threat to the Western powers, and a threat to some of your people who have some hidden agendas. Not every one of us who is black is automatically a Pan-Africanist. No, some don't even believe in that. They don't even think that we can move forward. Some have some personal interests, and they don't care about the well-being of their people. They care about their own personal interests above the well-being of their people. Not every one of us is genuine. That's the reality. So some of your people who may be used against you, I think even Malcolm X put it better. He said they will pay one of us to kill one of us just to say it was one of us. So if they come directly at you, people will say that, okay, everybody will know. But if they use one of your people to kill you, then they can say, look at them. They even kill their own good leaders. So the blame game comes back to us again. And this is why I think that every Pan-Africanist leader need a very tight security, because we have learned what happened to people like Patrice Emery Lumumba. We have learned from what happened to people like Thomas Sankara. We have also learned what happened to people like America Cabral. We have learned a lot from those incidents, and we don't want it to repeat. We want our good leaders to remain in power until they are done with their mission. But for the meantime, whilst they are in power, they need a very tight security, and they should not be naive about it. So that will be my first advice. And the other point will be, in as much as you do good as a leader, you serve the interests of your people, don't overstay in power. That's another problem most African leaders or Pan-Africanist leaders make. It is said that when a bird stands on a tree for too long, it attracts stones. And I think at some point, when people even need you most, that's the time that you should resign. Don't overstay in power. If you overstay, you create a lot of enemies as time goes on. Do your part and resign on time. That's how your legacy will continue, and that's what you work for will stay. But if people use force against you, at the end of the day, all you work for will go to zero. Just like what happened to Libya. We have seen Gaddafi, no doubt, have played his part. You cannot compare him with a lot of African leaders. But one of his flaws was to overstay in power for 40-something years.
But there is people can also say, perhaps this guy is bringing development. Let us allow him to rule us. It's better, because when he leaves power, the other guy that is going to come, maybe is going to misuse our resources. Look at Rwanda, their president. I believe he overstayed in power.
Yeah.
But then still there is development in that country.
Yeah. And as he's staying, he's also having more enemies fighting.
More enemies fighting.
So I'm not saying that you should not stay for a reasonable time to work and carry out your agenda. I'm saying don't overstay.
Yeah.
Because if we overstay, as time goes on, people want to you are human. You'll make one or two mistakes. And the more you make mistakes, the more you create enemies. And as time goes on, they will want to also use somebody against you.
Yeah.
So I'm saying do what you have to do, but resign timely. Don't wait people to force you out of power.
Okay.
That's one flaw that I have observed with most of our good leaders. They do well, but also they overstay in power, which in most cases will result to them being coup, which is force, which is violence, and then it may not be the best for our people.
Right.
So in as much as they do good, they should learn to resign on time.
That's why Piolo will say, no matter how good a dancer you are, you must learn to leave the stage. Now, Mr. Cham, the African Union, recently we have seen in countries like Nigeria, we have seen in Sudan, fighting, women have been killed, somewhere raped. Yet we have an international organization called the African Union, which is established to safeguard the interests of the African people. But most often, this union will stand aside and look at those innocent people being killed. African Union, what is your advice to this organization called African Union, standing aside, or they will stand away looking at innocent African people being executed in Nigeria, in Sudan, in Libya? What is your advice to African Union?
Anyway, if I would give an advice to that body, which is called the African Union, it would be to serve the interests of Africans and not the interests of the West. We have realized for too long that that organization is not fit for purpose. Reason being, you said it, you see problems happening in an African country. You do not talk about it. You do not take a step. That is why all these coup d'etats are happening.
Yes, so
We said democracy. Democracy, we abuse the word democracy. You as a head of state overstaying in power, and you say that is still democracy, when you are doing more harm to your country than good. That is why all these coup d'etats that we see happening, they are happening for that reason. Look at Burkina Faso, for example. The leader who was there was not serving the purpose for which he was being elected. Look at Niger. Look at Mali. And a host of other countries will follow suit if the trend continues. Because we go behind the scenes and proclaim democracy, democracy, when we are not doing the right thing to serve the interests of our people.
At the right time.
At the right time. That is why the African Union as an organization must be ready to work in the interest of Africa and not the West.
So
that is my advice.
So profound. Back to you again, Mr. Cham. What do you think is going to happen when our founding fathers like Kwame Nkrumah, like in the Gambia here we have E.F. Small, we have Modibo Keita, were to rise up from their grave and look at the Africa that they have struggled for, some for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. What do you think is going to happen?
Some will not believe that this is the Africa that they have fought to liberate. Some will hardly believe that if E.F. Small was to rise up again from where he is lying and find out that the Gambia is at this level after 60 years of independence, he wouldn't believe. Because when we rose up to fight and say we want to be independent, we said to the West, to the colonialists, that we want to liberate our people. We said to them that we want to take charge of our education. We want to take charge of our health, our agriculture. We want to take charge of everything. See what is happening today. Go to our institutions, the health sector, medicines. You go to hospitals, you are sick, you don't have money, you will die.
You die, of course.
see the agriculture sector. A huge chunk of our budget goes to debt service. And the agriculture sector, which is supposed to be the driving force for our economy, receives the less allocation, 9-point-something%. If EF small should rise up by now and find the way the Gambia is, he will say, no, this is not the Gambia that I fought to liberate.
This is not the Gambia.
And a lot of other people will do the same. Africa all over will tend to say that this is not their countries that they fought to liberate.
Thank you so very much. Dennis,
Yes.
in 1963, in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, when 32 heads of independent African states converged under the part of their agreement was to ensure unity and solidarity among African states, to eradicate colonialism, to promote cooperations among member states. But today is the reverse, is the opposite. What causes that?
Comes back to the same thing. Not every African president has the interests of Africans in heart. Some of them are puppets. Some of them are lackeys of the neo-colonizers, as the founding fathers put it. And I tend to agree with them. I agree with the Casablanca group that instant unification was the solution. It has happened, and we may not be able to change history. It has happened already. We cannot do anything about it. But it's a lesson for us to learn from it and see how best to apply that today to avoid falling in the same pit hole that our forefathers or some of them fall into. And the reason why that cooperation is limited is because you have leaders with different agendas.
Sure.
Some leaders are genuinely for the interests of their people, some are not. Some are just there to serve imperial interests or neo-colonial interests. They are not there for the interests of their people.
Sure.
So this is why the division will be there. But I always say, you don't need a PhD degree to know what Africa needs to develop. It's just so basic. Everybody's seeing the problem. We Africans are living to see it every day. But the problem is dishonest. We are just dishonest or have dishonest leaders. And we cannot 100% blame our leaders because our leaders are a reflection of the society that they come from. And so a corrupt society produces corrupt leaders. And that's exactly what is happening from the foundation, the grassroots. That's where the change will start. And then the leaders on their side too, there is high time they also be honest to themselves and serve the interests of their people. Most of them actually are not serving the interests of their people. So left you.
But when you ask some of those Africans leaders right now, you ask them, they will tell you, if we don't succumb to these European ideologies or if we don't succumb to this European concept, the people in my country will die. They will not be able to survive. Because most of these aids are coming from this EU. So we have to subscribe to their ideas.
And which is, this aid is not helping us to develop. It's not the solution. Since independence, we have been receiving aid. Have we developed? No. So basically, logically, the aid is not the way forward. The way forward is economic self-reliance. We need to rely on ourselves. Africa, we have a fertile land. In fact, let's not go far. Let's just look at the Gambia. We have an arable land. What is stopping the Gambia from feeding itself or feeding herself rather? We have all the resources that we need. In fact, half of our water is not brine. Half of our water is fresh.
It's fresh, yeah.
Which means all you have to do is just irrigate it, and then you can have water supply year-round. Gambia don't even need to depend on rainfall. Because the water is already there. And the arable land is already there. So what is the problem actually? The determination is not from the leadership. Only Jari Pacha rice field can feed the entire country. In fact, the Senegambia region, let me put it that way. But still, we are importing rice in billions. Can that be produced in the Gambia so that billion that we are spending to import rice, we will reinvest it in our own farmers, and then we'll be able to feed ourselves. Because as Thomas Sankara said, who feeds you controls you. As far as they feed us, they will continue to put down conditions that don't favor us, and we will take it because we are unable to feed ourselves, and we don't want to stand independent. In fact, that's the reason why we asked independence for at the first place. Our founding fathers asked for independence because they believe that we can stand on ourselves and be self-reliant, and then that's the way forward. But in as much as we think that other Europeans we cannot develop, that's the kind of mentality that will keep us backward, because the Europeans is not in their best interest for us to develop. We have to accept that reality. So we have to be on our own. If that was the case, then our founding fathers would not even ask for independence. They will have allowed the European colonialism to continue colonizing us. But they see that these people don't have our interests at heart. Then let us demand and rule our own people because we have the interests of our people at heart, and then make the development. But if now we think that, okay, the Europeans, without them we cannot develop, then we are living in a daydream there, because it's not in their best interest for us to develop. History have proven it, and even up to date we are seeing the same thing. All right.
Thank you very much. Still, we are discussing Pan-Africanism, but of course, you know, we have to discuss Gambia as well. In 1951, a new political party emerged called the Gambia Democratic Party, formed by John Oliver. In the same 1951, the UP emerged, formed by P.S. Njai. Then we had the Muslim Congress Party, the People Progressive Party, and all these people, of course, they were advocating for, I think, Pan-Africanism, of course, I believe, because Karaba, they were also Pan-Africans. E.F. Small too, though he don't form any political party, but he formed a trade union, Pan-Africans.
Yeah.
These people, do we betray these people? Or we don't betray these people? Because during those times, these people, they told the Europeans, grant us our independence, we can able to feed ourselves, we can able to develop the Gambia, we can able to unite Gambian people, all under one umbrella. But today we have seen there is division everywhere, there is slow pace of development. I believe these people have been betrayed. What is your take?
Of course, I would agree with you that they have been betrayed, in the sense that all that they have advocated for, all what they have advocated for to liberate the Gambia from poverty, to free the Gambian people from poverty, is still existing. In fact, at some point I ask myself, are we truly independent? Because what was meant to get us to that level is still the same. That is why I always ask myself, are we truly independent? And the question, the answer is simple. We are not, because if we are independent, remember, let me drag you back a little. When E.F. Small stood and fought for us, in fact, it came as a trade union initially. Later, political parties emerged. And they went to the colonialists and told them that we want to be free. We want to take charge of our affairs. And it is still heartbroken to see the way the Gambia is. Because after 60 years, you are not able to feed your people. Rice, which is our main staple food of the Gambia, is being imported in tons. Thousands and thousands of tons. And of course, this country is able to produce enough rice to feed the Gambia. If only we apply the right procedure. You know, every sickness has a medicine for cure. So you go back to history, learn about the way our mothers used to farm to get rice from the rice fields. Our mothers before used to harvest lots of rice. They will eat year in, year out. And as a government, if you are not thinking of how to liberate yourselves, to feed your people, to feed themselves, you are not thinking. Let me talk about Burkina Faso. In 1986, when Thomas Sankara stood and said, then there was severe hunger. He stood and said he was going to free his country from hunger. And of course he did. That year, Burkina Faso harvested more than enough maize to feed Burkina Faso. If Burkina is able to do so, why not Gambia? Our leader or the leaders of this country need to see the interests of the people and not their own personal interests. Go to Zambia before Kenneth Kaunda. Kenneth Kaunda retired, came out of presidency with only $8,000. $8,000 in his account. You talk about our presidents, they're counting millions and billions. Are they serving our interests? And we are able to feed ourselves as a country. The river, the oceans, we have enough fish to feed the Gambia. We only need conscious leaders to be able to harness those resources to put the Gambia on the right footing.
Right, we have come to the tail end of this discussion, but I'll allow my guests to of course, to give a closing maybe remark regarding Pan-Africanism, and of course, to their own movement, nurturing sovereign citizens. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, first I will start with the Africans, especially young Africans. We can develop Africa. Development is the state of the mind. If you think you can develop, you will develop. If you think that you cannot develop, you will never develop. Let us not make the easy decision of embarking on the bad way. That will not be the solution. Do we want our kids to also embark on the bad way? No. Why can't we pool our resources, our potentials, and develop our own continent? We cannot do it if we are fleeing from our problems. That's for fellow Africans, especially young Africans. Now, coming to the Gambia, talking about nurturing patriotic citizens. I think that's the responsibility of every Gambian who is sober-minded to go out there and educate others to be patriotic. Teach one to also teach one. That's how we can have everybody involved. Whatever your profession is, you can at least try to enlighten the next person to you. And we must keep in mind that governments don't form themselves. They don't just wake up out of the blues and then become the government of the day. It is us, Gambians, who put them in power. And whatever kind of leadership we have, they are a reflection of us, whether we like it or not. We must be honest in our voting. Development, we cannot pray for development. No angel is coming down to develop it for us. It is our own decision that will decide whether we will develop or we will be backward. So in as much as you are going to vote, vote for ideas and content of character, not sentiments of tribal affiliation or religious affiliation. That will not take our country forward. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chan.
Okay, thank you, Aliu. Once again, my advice to young Africans is to continue spreading the message of unity. Because united we stand and divided we fall. It is only when we are united as Africans that is the time we will be able to move our agenda as a continent. And remember, we need to compete in the world stage. It is high time we become diners and not people who will be under the table picking crumbs. So it is important we unite as Africans. As Gambians, we also need to unite as one people and then see the future of the Gambia. We stop talking and take action, because only in taking action we will be able to change the narratives. Youths form the huge chunk of the population. So when there is going to be any change, or if there is going to be any change, it should come from the youths. And we should now start to take action and stop the complaining. That is why nurturing sovereign citizens or nurturing patriotic citizens, the movement I am part of, is engaged in a series of activities to sensitize the population. We need to unite, take action, and lift the Gambia from the current situation, because it is indeed not fit for people to live. The current situation is not fit for people to live. We need to take care of things, and the only way we can do that is to think critically, think positively, unite as one people, talk about the changes, talk about the issues, and then begin to confront them boldly. This is the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Two gentlemen from team or from the movement called Nurturing Sovereign Citizens. Thank you so very much once again for honoring our invitations. As people will say always, African, we must unite or we perish. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ali.
Yes. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like our videos on YouTube.